Okay. So if you're a man in our modern culture, you're going to come into reoccurring pain throughout your life. And we hear about this pain a lot. We hear about higher suicide rates, overworked. We hear about male depression. We hear about divorce, custody, the parental alienation. We're starting to hear more and more about being attacked by women with personality disorders. And this pain is listed off like a checklist of what men are suffering through, and all of us can relate with it. Yet there's a gigantic lie around all of this pain. And what's interesting about this is that it's not just for men, it's for women. And I really specialize working with men, and so I get more detailed in that. But there's something of what I call a false solution, which is the main theme of all of this. A false solution that is delivered over and over again that gives us a sense of hope, a sense of unity. It actually solves quite a bit of problems, but it doesn't completely solve our problem. And in fact, because of that, it creates new problems and progresses us into further pain, suffering, demise, generational pain. And something about this false solution, when we really dissect it, what we're going to talk about today, and specifically about certain forms of pain that men run into, is it is intertwined in so much of our life. We always hear about a lie. We always hear about this grand conspiracy. We always hear about all this distrust that we have. And yet, the biggest lie is something that we all participate in almost daily. So let's jump into this pattern of male pain, the pattern of male pain that we all know, we all see, we can all relate with. So, as I said, higher suicide rates, higher addiction rates. We have parental alienation. It happens in a completely different way and happened first with fathers. It pains men in a unique way. We have custody in general, divorce. All of these things have become catastrophic to men. New forms of depression, new forms of worthlessness. And I'd even say that these pains of depression, not feeling a part of, not having motivation, they're kind of the sneakiest ones in the male experience because nobody really sees them. We don't see a reason for them. And this is part of this reoccurring pattern that we have. We have sexual shame. We have denial of sexual abuse. We have an objectification now of the male in terms of sex and sexuality. It's kind of interesting because my friends growing up, or myself, they would share these stories as they entered into college and whatnot about how a man is always viewed as a stud when he's had multiple partners, and a woman is viewed as a slut. And this was true, but now a man is viewed as a predator, a misogynist, oversexed, dangerous person. And a woman is seen as somebody who has choice and openness and freedom while having multiple sexual partners and so on. And I'm actually not saying one's right or wrong, like to be sexually active or not. I would actually probably lean on do those things, enjoy yourself, enjoy your body. But it's an interesting labeling that has switched culturally. And so we as men have these problems that are now cultural phenomenons. They are making us weaker. They're killing us quickly. They're causing us to be more angry and full of rage in all these different ways. And everybody seems to agree upon them, but their answer to them are these solutions that are very, very incomplete. So what happens in our culture is this pattern of male pain that we need to understand. And this is really, really important. This is a foundational belief that I try and hammer into people when they work with me that I think is really important. So this pattern of male pain that we have in our culture is men have pain. That pain is real. At first, when hearing about it, it is denied. It is diminished. It is said that it doesn't exist. It's compared to female pain. It's given all sorts of reasons on why it shouldn't be taken as seriously, or does it need anything that really should deserve any sort of attention. A man can't really be a victim. He doesn't deserve to be, or a man doesn't have that time to say that he is one. And even, men might be saying, well, I'm not a victim. And, that's great. That comes from a good perspective, but there's a value in having that time. So when that man has pain, that man is given a solution to relieve that pain, to make it feel good, right? And that fits within whatever cultural narrative. So it could come from a politically correct side of basically saying a man has pain and he needs to feel more or open up more. But it could come from another side, and I kind of polarize this, but there's everything in between, of a hyper masculine side, like a manosphere side, and a politically correct side. In that manosphere side, might say, well, you're not a victim. You can tough it out. You can work with it and all these different things, right? And this gives relief. Like, this works. So this is very interesting. Of every single one of these solutions, they don't always have to work, but on every extreme of our ideologies, of our thoughts, there are solutions that do work. Okay. And they kind of sift through the evolution of offering self-help or whatever, these types of things, that they well work, okay? But for every single one of those, they also don't touch the root. They don't fully solve the problem. They usually, instead of solving anything deeper, anything more rich within that man, they will do the opposite of whatever that pain is. So if I'm lonely, I get attention. What are some other opposites of being lonely? I get power. If I'm going through a divorce and a custody battle and I'm disenfranchised as a man, I'm going to go find power elsewhere. I'm going to replace it in these ways, right? Or if I hurt so bad, I'm going to realize how bad that hurt is. And then we're going to hear some propaganda from a politically correct culture. And we're going to say, I just need to open my heart and feel good. And in both of those, once again, those solutions offer relief. They do have working qualities to it. They have answers. They have us feel good. They bond us with other people. They help reshape our beliefs. They're, by all means, functioning solutions. It's just they stop at the opposite of that pain. And what's interesting about this is there's another component to it, okay? And that component is because it doesn't fully solve the problem, and it may promote a message of that, the opposite of your pain is the thing. Not being poor in being rich solves the pains that you might go through with being poor. Or if you're going to argue that point, that means you disagree with making money, which there's much more to that than all of this. Like, either of those arguments doesn't solve anything. That causes a whole new problem. It creates a generational problem. That right there, a solution that doesn't complete the answer, creates a massive, massive problem that you're going to have later in life. And maybe you won't, actually. Maybe you'll get by on it. You won. But your kids, the world afterwards, everything that's inherited from your decisions and thoughts is going to be much, much worse. So let me give you some quick fire examples of this, of a false solution of what that looks like. Okay, so a man goes through a custody battle. Politically correct culture says you got to take the high road, you have to forgive. She's the mother of your kids. You need to understand that. And as a man, it might be a little bit dangerous to be thinking these things. Or if you're accused of something, maybe you should question it. And the man goes, okay, I'm going to do that. He starts to take classes on it. He starts to get a new perspective. He starts to realize how male pain or misogyny or the patriarchy or whatever being silenced in these ways, that the toxic man has infected him, and that he finds some useful tactics to override that. And those could be good. They could be good. But they also come at the cost of denying his nature, his self, his sex. That urges that he have to be filtered through what a culture says to him in order to be confident or to be competitive or to have a sex drive. And on the other side of that, let's say another man goes through divorce, or that man maybe goes through, the PC narrative, and then he's like, man, this sucks, 2 years later, and he finds the red pill, or he finds like a a men's movement. He goes, "Oh my God, this is amazing. This is pointing out everything." Like almost in the same way that feminism makes its points. Men are systematically disenfranchised. You look at the divorces, but look at the stats on male suicide. Look at drug addiction. Look at all these different things. Men are screwed over and they're taught to be disempowered. So what I want is to have as much power as possible. That's going to solve the problems, and it does. You start to gain power in whatever ways you can have it. You feel better. You go, man, the sexual marketplace is defined by my status. And so now I'm going to show that. I'm going to get more attention. It works. It's like, man, or, actually, I don't know if you guys know this, but that will get you attention. But this has failed tactically over and over again in terms of sex and dating and so on. It may get you attention, but there's a lot of problems with it. But you get a result, right? You get a result from upping your value. You start to believe different things about it, and you learn about hypergamy, and you learn about how to act, and you gain confidence. The confidence you always longed for, but you weren't allowed to have it in our society. So it makes sense, right? It makes amazing sense. But some of the problems come with that is that it doesn't solve what maybe pain or hurt did to you. It doesn't solve different elements of confidence. You learn to cover things up. And in fact, you start to look at friendship, love. What's the sum of your 5 closest friends is somehow your net worth. And is true or untrue as that is, it's definitely untrue for me. But is true or untrue as that is, we see that as truth. That goes beyond human choice of friendship. And when it gets to sex and sexual partners, it moves into pure objectification, pure of categorizing. And what's interesting about this is that there's truth to both of those things. Like they're not completely untrue. We objectify people all day long. Feminists objectify men. Men objectify women. We objectify customers. We objectify people that we see online. These things happen all the time within some sort of good. So it's like, what's there? And one side hates the other. And this goes into depression. Let's say depressed men. Women may say, well, men didn't learn how to express their feelings. And then the PC dudes come in and say, man, you need to open up in these ways and be at one with things and find peace and learn to meditate. And then the alpha guy culture comes in and says, man, you need to learn to dominate, use your body, win, make money, build things. You're going to feel better. I don't know a depressed man that learns how to fight. All these types of things, right? And they're like these opposite things. You can't be one without the other. When it comes down to male anger, the same thing. PC culture might say that it's toxic. And then manosphere culture might say that it's sacred. And both are seen as solutions. Both have followings of people. Both have things that work. Yet, as I say that, whatever side you're on, if you're on the manosphere side, if you're on the PC side, if you're on whatever different ideology side, if I say both work, both disagree. Like it's really a lonely place for me to have this opinion. And where this comes from is I always kind of talk about is when you really, really work with pained people, you realize how meaningless these things are, how they don't matter. I remember at the early stages of the red pill, and I had already seen movements like that with men start up. And I said, man, when have you really helped the guy? And the guy said to me, he said, I just did. Before I talked to you, I talked to a man who was going through a divorce and I helped him. And I thought, dude, like, did you really help him? And at the time, this was like in 2015 or 2016, I didn't realize how to make that point. I didn't realize that, man, you talked to him on the phone and made him feel better and you feel better. And that's worthy. That's not like bad. But if we only take our solutions, the full solution to these major problems of male suicide, addiction, of abuse that's happened that gets denied, of toxic women that we have dated over and over again or been married to. If we only take the solution for a major problem for the first 5 minutes, the first month of somebody's experience in that, and even the first 6 months in that, and we don't look at how this may affect him later in life or what happens 10 or 20 years later, we don't accept a responsibility for that, we build something that is very, very flawed. We make wisdom impossible to exist, and we make immaturity the only option to grow. And I really want you to think about that. Really think about that. If we do not accept accountability for what we put forward, and we accept rewards for winning or having the mic drop argument, being able to have a debate where we look good, convincing more people to agree with us and saying that that is the right way, we make wisdom impossible to survive. What do we do to integrity? Because integrity doesn't matter, because it can get changed every time more people like it, or we can win something quick. This then defines strength, intellect, all these different things that we value become cheapened in the soil of immaturity. And that's what we see over and over again with our culture. So let's talk about this pattern of the false solution. What does that mean? What does it mean to have a false solution? What a great word that everybody could get wrong. So I want to define it a little bit. Number one, a false solution is always going to sound noble. It's going to sound righteous. It's going to work. It's kind of like the idea of the false solution. You get it right away. You understand it. It gives meaning to a cultural context. It's going to offer hope that if I understand this thing, like the false solution, or like the red pill, or like feminism, if I can understand it and get it, it is going to resolve a lot of the problems that I've felt. I can relate with it, these deep things that have sat with me. Okay, it's going to give function, right? So it's going to work. It's going to alleviate things. It was very interesting. I remember I was talking with somebody just who was a friend. I wasn't trying to have an argument. And I said something about feminism, and I wasn't trying to say I hate feminism or I think all feminism is bad. I said, man, that's one of the flaws in feminism. And they said, so there's a flaw. And immediately it was like, okay, shit, sorry. Now I'm an evil person and not somebody who can have a thought. I immediately turned into an object. And they said, you have a problem with feminism? So you don't agree with equality? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, well, how did it come to this? Like, I actually forget what I was talking about, but I was talking about a specific thing, right? And a specific issue around that. And it immediately turns into an ideology, which is the next part of this, is that not only does it give a function and a solution, it heals part of the pain or alleviates it. It doesn't fully heal it. It almost always promotes an ideology. So a solution, in order to work, and we hear it from a bunch of people, it's got to have a community. It's got to have an anthem. It's got to have people uniting around it. It's got to have a cause. And in fact, its function for you of healing you, it becomes less important than the ideology that it promotes, the unity that it promotes. It becomes a badge. It becomes like, hey, we're conspiracy theorists. Well, which one? Are you a flat earther? Are you a 9/11 person? Does it all mix and da-da-da? And, and it becomes this identity that people match with in massive ways. And the last thing that it gives is it gives purpose. And this really is an interesting thing, because when we look at the pain of our culture, when we look at the consistent pains, we can see starvation for those things, right? So purpose is of our nature. We were born with it, like needing to drive or even read or present on camera. This is not in our nature. And it's very far away from presentation in tribal life or hunter-gatherer life, like when people try and say that they had these complicated economies like ours. It was very rare in their economies to have to fight for self-worth within earning something or doing a task that was detached from how they lived, that would build social hierarchy, to have to do something within our culture, like have a job, have status, to have a place to live. These things were I would say non-existent. You could make that argument in hunter-gatherer societies, but it was very, very different than how we do it. That pressure is not there. And things like purpose, we're dying for. We will do anything for it. Whereas in more primitive cultures, societies, and even primitive civilizations that are, more complicated but not as crazy and uh, in nuts as U.S. culture or first world Western culture, there's going to be less of a need and a grabbing at for purpose and happiness. And if you take this drug or take this pharmaceutical, you're going to finally be it. Or if you buy into this sort of chemtrail thing or religion or offshoot rebellion group, religion, whatever it is, spiritual belief, form of meditation. Like if you do that, you're going to be complete and it fulfills my world and it's something that's important. And you know what? Sometimes I might be angry or I might not be happy, but that's more important because I get to be a part of something. And all of this is because we are starved so much from our nature, so much from these many, many different things. It's kind of crazy because when we looked at the movements of like the paleo movement when it came out in like 2010, of course it happened before then, but when it started to get really popularized, you started to hear these people talk about diet, and then you started to hear these people talk about ways of living, and it's kind of funny because they could never really make it work for social things and that sort of stuff. It always turned into a false solution, right? You became like Dave Asprey, who could give great information, but there's a certain neurosis that's propelling his form of health and taking X amount of supplements a day, or I don't know, maybe he's changed, but I think he's actually been here to do an interview at my house in this wall behind me that you can't see. I'll try and find it online. It's not on my channel. But let's give an example that's a little bit deeper, okay, of what a false solution does. So remember, just on that quick fire, I took a little bit of time. A false solution is going to present an answer to pain. It's going to give a solution to that. It's not going to fully do it. It gives it relief. But in that, it gives unity, it gives purpose, it gives meaning, it gives definition. It wins arguments very easily. It only needs kind of like a quick fix culture. Like it doesn't need to last the test of time. It can basically win an argument. It can be like, man, we dropped the microphone and we're good. And ultimately, because it doesn't solve that problem, it creates a new problem. And you're probably going, man, how does that happen? What do you give me an example? And so we're going to use an example of feminism and fatherhood. And feminism was this thing that it's my belief was very, very needed. When you look at women's pain, it was for real. And myself traveling quite a bit, living and actually work with indigenous communities. And that's, where, well, I had many beliefs on tribalism and whatnot, but I live with no contact tribes, or I'm their only point of contact. When you're traveling in some of those countries, you see the pain of women, the true suffering of women. And what happened in first world Western cultures, we started to move that away, right? And in that, it solved a lot of problems. And there was a huge fight around it. And many women needed to be really loud. They needed to not stand for certain things. They need to put their foot down. This is what we hear with like first wave feminism, right? Fighting for voting rights, fighting for working rights, and all these different things. And let's just say with like being able to get a divorce, being able to have a job, economically better yourself, having equal opportunity in work, these types of being able to vote, these things are good. And if we were to ever criticize them, it's like, you fucking monster. And I'm actually going to start down that road. And it's almost like you can't. If you do that, you're immediately a bad person. And see, what's interesting is those things solved huge amounts of problems. But there were women who diminished men and were probably very justifiably angry at certain men or just the overall sex of masculinity or men. And there were women that took jobs from men, and maybe men who were qualified lost jobs or they couldn't get jobs, and they weren't used to dealing with women who had power. And that first transition was probably really tough. And then when second and third wave came in, it really talked down to those men. What's a bigger thing, which I really noticed, it was working with men immediately, which I could not believe. I was like, this is just an outlier. This doesn't really happen. And then it just happened one guy after another. Every man that came to work with me 20 years ago who had a single mother had the same story. And I couldn't believe that this was true. Like, I couldn't. Now, I just want to put things in perspective because I have a different demographic of men that came from single moms that have a very different story that came to me through the addiction world after this. But at first, my first clients had money. They had the ability to get therapy. They had the ability to, do a lot of different things that society said would help them with whatever problems they had. And they didn't fully work. These men have the same mom, alienated from their dad, they were lied to about what their dad was. They were taught to hate their dad. They were used to belittle their father. Sometimes when their fathers got them, their father would also play that game back and, play chess with the kid, which is, terrible. It's abusive. It destroys a child's mentality. And these men all had the same story 5, 10, 15 years later when they were reunited with their fathers. That the differences would be the variant of the father. Sometimes he was completely broken, and sometimes he wanted to live a really cool life. But they all empathized with that father, and they hated the mother. Now, they also loved the mother. They loved the mother. The mother was the mother. She did her thing. She accomplished her goal of making the child love them. But when they realized she lied, it made them really hateful. Okay, and so I couldn't believe this was happening. Now, when I went on to work really deeply with drug addicts, and especially drug addicts who were in prisons, it was the opposite. The dads left. The dads broke promises with their kids. They screwed over their kids. They were non-existent. And the mother was really disenfranchised. And you saw that pain. And guess what? Guess what you see when working in prison systems or aftercare for women that go through hardcore drug things, which for me, I think that the statistic of men being more male addicts than female addicts, it's partially true, but that whole statistic is way, way off because how that statistic is gathered from people who are incarcerated, arrested, people who get, who get institutionalized for drugs, and women usually have to or can, however you want to put it, they can get out of a lot of trouble because authority figures will have sex with them. And this does happen. So a lot of those women don't make it into jails, institutions, rehabs, these types of things. And I'll tell you this, if you work with any woman that has some addiction issues, there is a lot of very, very different and unique issues that a male addict is not going to have as much exposure to. And you could probably guess what those things are. And they get really disturbing, right? So it's kind of interesting. Like when I work with addicts, we're all equals. Like I don't want anybody to suffer. I'm better at working with men in that. But I've always been critical of that statistic because it's almost like what? So you should ignore female addicts and these guys who are promoting like kind of a red pill or manosphere message of, these horrible tragedies that men go through don't actually really do any service to work with these guys. At most, there could be stuff around dating, but it's all money, sex, power, and not the real deep stuff with that, right? It's always the false solution. But addiction is brought up all the time. Suicide's brought up all the time. Divorce and custody is brought up all the time. And let's just do the math on this. which one of those red pill or manosphere or any of those people, men's rights activists, which one of those people has any service, product, or help for drug addicts? Which one has any service, product, or help for people going through divorce or custody? And some do, but the big ones don't. They use it all the time to make themselves popular. They use my pain and your pain for that. Like, that's pretty fucked up. And then when it comes down to abuse or sexual issues or things like that, it's always like, get more power over women or, cut them out completely. There's no real functioning solution that has a long-term effect. Like there's very little culture of that, right? And there's very little actual help for these, what I would say are emergency problems, and what they say are even bigger emergency problems to pump you full of hysteria. So that was a long thing, which I'm sorry about that. I can, hey man, me and scripts, it's ADHD in our culture. Where's my help for that? Where's my help for that? Thank you guys for sticking with it. But when we get to this thing with feminism, right? Feminism hurt men. It hurt men, and it refuses to apologize for it. Now, as I say that, I'm not saying that we should hate feminism. I'm saying that we should actually be smart and intelligent, because there were really good things that it did. If you seriously travel around the third world, if you interact with recovering addict females, if you go and work at battered women's shelters, like, you will see that we live in a pretty good society that created. There were good things about it, but it absolutely did not take responsibility for overlooking mental illness in women, to have them take out maybe their depression or anger on men, on their kids, their daughters and young boys. It caused a whole bunch of issues when it came into the third, fourth wave feminism, on hating men, objectifying them, seeing them as belittling. When it comes down to sex and it comes down to the value of female sexuality, it then sees it as a tool that can be justifiably used to manipulate men. And if men are pained by that, it references the women from the 60s, 70s, 50s, before the movement really took hold. It references them as their justification for female pain. Or what's even worse about this actually I hate, like I said in last night's live stream, there's some work I've done with women in the last couple of years, and I don't talk about it much now because it's not fully formed. But man, I have seen horrifically disenfranchised women that begged for their life, that were willing to go through all sorts of horrific sexual humiliation just to get out of, as a survival tool, to get out of situations. I've seen women who have carried babies and care for those babies and love those babies, who are byproducts of assault, of violent assault, of, inner neighborhood manipulation. And I don't see anybody helping them. I don't see anybody who talks about a political ideology, and you can really easily do it. Like, I wasn't trying to do it. I was actually around men who were disenfranchised and came around them. I was like, okay, well, I'll see what I can do, put you in contact with whatever people. An interesting thing about that is, if you're a man helping women, this is another byproduct of feminism. If you're helping them, like, nobody's helping them. They're alone. They're in danger every day. And it's like, well, you're helping this guy and you might have some resources. Can you help me? This is interesting. People in their environment, them, their family, they see you as helping them. I'm not going like, man, I should be congratulated for this. This is making me feel good. It's like, okay, I'll put you in contact with somebody. As soon as I enter that into first world Western culture, what do you think happens? What's the first thing? What's the first thing that is said to me by a man or woman? Right? It's the first thing. It is, you shouldn't be helping them. They need a strong and empowered woman. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Or, what are you doing helping them? Like, why are you helping people lower than you? Like, what? These things that didn't even cross my mind to be a part of it, which they say is part of the patriarchal disease of power. Like, this is something that if I said that thought, that indoctrination, just like how you argue that the patriarchy, you know, had a systematic attack on women, your ideology has created a horrible mindset that maintains pain and suffering. That when you look at completely disenfranchised, war torn cultures, impoverished cultures, and you bring back what you've done, what work you've done in those cultures, and you tell people about it. And again, myself, who has an online media presence, maybe not a huge one, but I've always made money off of Lyme. I've always made money off of videos. I've never published any of this stuff. Like, I don't talk about it, right? You like, I'm mentioning it now as a thing, but I'm not being specific about it. Those people will basically say, why are you there? Why are you helping these people? Why would you do it? Why would you be around it? You would only be around it because it helps you feel more powerful and you're hurting them. And then they say, because the answer would be, and see if you could guess this, the answer would be you would promote a message of feminism and empowerment to them. And I just want to be clear with you on what that would mean. If you gave somebody who doesn't have an economic structure to live, who doesn't have a culture, who has a culture that's ultra violent to everybody around it who's poor, and you give them a book or a thought or an ideology, this is one of the greatest flaws of our culture, is that we cannot distinguish. We think thought, intellect, and an idea, passing it on, just like my friend who said, I just helped a guy going through divorce today because he had a 5-minute call with him. Or maybe it was 30 minutes. Maybe it was 6 hours. Maybe he talked to that person every day for a month. But in no way was he responsible for finding the solution for that guy. And this is where a false solution becomes so prevalent. When we get into this whole thing of feminism creating problems, created a lot of good, and I think still creates good, okay? Me saying that makes all the man dudes hate me, right? It's like, well, how could you think that, you fool, you purple-pilled beta cuck, which I've been called many times, right? But in that whole thing, feminism created a new problem. So remember, a false solution gives a solution, gives relief, gives an answer, gives a unity, it gives an ideology, it gives people coming together, but it doesn't fully solve something. And so it doesn't just create more pain and more like, you know, people that have the seed of hate grows a little bit more in the dark and that sort of thing, but it creates a whole new thing. So what are some of those new things? Well, some of those new things is a massive subculture of men who are pissed off, a massive subculture of men who have been told for now decades that their instincts are toxic, that by default they're bad, that they are owed, women who never had to deal with any suffering, but they're owed that pain, that they can be belittled. They're walking into dating, sex, and relationships with then being objectified, with having to be lowered and humiliated. That a man seeking out women in any sort of, you know, oversexed way, or in a way where it's like, I just want to get laid, or I just want to fuck somebody and not care about them, is seen as a rapist. And it's equivalent because of rape culture, right? That it would be then the equivalent of violent rape, of violence done towards women, of violence done towards men. And so much to the point where this is kind of a sad thing. I'll bring up a client of mine who is dead. He died because of an infection while he was being a prostitute. And he always said all these racist things. And I asked him, I said, dude, man, what, you know, why are you always saying that? And he just said to me, and again, like, he just said to me, he said, you know why I hate those people, man? Is because when they rape you, they're the worst. And Then he described a little bit, and I said, "Hey, man, cool." And we don't allow people to express where their pain comes from. You know, this man, when he would talk about him being sexually assaulted, it was pretty brutal. It was not good. Like, my YouTube video may already be banned by saying these words, but they were horrible every single time, without exception, to every single one of my male clients who's been sexually assaulted. As soon as he brings it up in a safe group, in a group that is designed for survivors of abuse in these ways, who has been the recipient of violent, and it doesn't have to be violent, right? But in these cases, violent, brutal, repetitive sexual assault. Oftentimes the moderator of that, but many women, the first thing they will say is, yeah, but women have to deal with that every day. My client who's dead, I mean, there are women who have probably been assaulted as much as that guy, but he never got to talk about it. He never got to talk about it because he always had to lower himself to that. And you know what? He probably wouldn't have complained about it, because you know what he always said to me? He said, man, I just stopped bringing it up. It's just easier, man. And I got it. I understood. And when we look at that, the politically correct culture would say he's a man that doesn't know how to express. This dude went to the place that was formed by that ideology to express, as well as all of my other experience with men who've gone through this, go to those and they are told to shut up. Yet that same group says toxic masculinity comes from shut up, don't express yourself. It's so interesting. This culture is extremely flawed, and it's okay. If I created a culture, or if a bunch of men created a culture, we would make it flawed too. But the key to that is that we would admit it, or hopefully the solution to that is that we would admit it and try and fix those things. You can't do that. It won't even listen to that. It's impossible to disagree that that could be a bad thing. And whenever I bring this up, like, I'll bring it up to like head counselors or therapists of certain units, and they'll say, well, I mean, really, if you're going to compare, I'm like, dude, I'm not trying to compare. I'm saying that this client is saying to heal the way we want you to, or it's invalid. Literally. Like, that's what's being said. You did not share your story of pain in a way that was right for our audience to hear that. Okay, so what does this create? It creates angry, angry people. Just like perhaps the patriarchy created angry women, we now have angry men. And those angry men are doing the same exact things that they hate about feminism, just in a different package. But it is still, my pain goes back for generations. My pain is represented by all men's pain, even though I don't give a fuck about drug addicts or actually abused people or men going through custody battles. I just want to share your stories. It's so bad that I can stand in front of you and my pain gets to do what it wants. It's justified. I am going to be loud. I'm going to stand in front of you. And if you tell me to shut up, my strength, built off of all the pain in the past of the men that I don't give a shit about, but want to say so I can be popular or whatever, is going to be louder and is going to be the representative of my strength. This is what men are doing. This is what we're doing. It's crazy. And we put labels on it of integrity, of wisdom, of power. What is real male strength? What is that to you? Define it. It's going to be an image of a guy that you've never met, that you've never seen his challenges. You've heard really cool stories about him. And in most cases, sadly, that man would never sit next to you. He would never see himself as your equal. He's divided by some sort of online image stardom or some sort of bullshit. And it's insane. So what do you think? What do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen if men do get power with this ideology? What do you think they're going to make? Why were there problems with feminism? Where were the failures of it? And still, straight up, there were successes. I always think it's interesting. Like if you talk to a red pill guy, you go, dude, you can go to a country and have all of that. And look at the men in that country. They're disenfranchised. You want to go to a country that has some male dominance and power, that is functioning, that isn't disenfranchised. It's a completely different thing. It's not what you want to do because you want to decide what you want. Like in cultures that are generally masculine, you could say Israel, you could say Japan, you'd say Italy, a good balance of it. But there's a strong masculine presence that still has an economy that works towards. Their men have a completely different rule. It's not just chaos, you know. But if you go to certain other places, man, it is fucked up. So here's the thing that we need to understand about the false solution. The false solution gives relief. It gives us a community. It gives us an identity. It cannot find wisdom because it demands an audience to define it. It demands its community to always be a part of it. It does not fully heal. It doesn't need to. It gives you the relief from your pain and the opposite of that. It basically gives you an identity to say you're doing okay and an identity to make you think you know how you're healing the world and helping people, right? You are a shaman philosopher that gets to state your words, or a great debater, or somebody who can make your point or win over popularity. But to actually help real people, this is drastically missing in our culture. You know, my buddy that died, I didn't know I was going to talk about him, and I kind of don't want to. A very good friend of mine, very, very good friend of mine. He was gay. He was a drug addict. He had a lot of problems. When he was using drugs, he became a male prostitute. He suffered a lot from it. He had a lot of opportunities, but one of the things was walking him through certain types of pain. The best therapists money could buy, the best psychologists, the best treatment centers, the best programs were all offered to him. And for some reason, and those people that helped him are great, qualified people in a lot of ways and have done a lot of good, right? It's not just because I'm going to say that something worked for me that they didn't do makes everything they did wrong. They did a lot of things right. And he was a very hard case. I mean, he passed away. I did not fulfill my goal in the job, or whatever you want to call it, right? But he would say to me, "You're the only person I could talk to about this stuff. You're the only person I was able to really talk to and go through why I hated this demographic of people or this ethnic group of people. You're the only person that didn't give me false emotion when I talked about painful things. You're the only person that I could talk to about walking in on a suicide from somebody that I loved." And what's so interesting is, just like him and the different people I know, I always get, well, why didn't you, he needed to talk to the professionals. He had the best fucking people to talk to. And some of his last words were to me. And none of those other people were there. And none of the people that said they cared about him and whatever were there. And I wasn't there because of a job. I wasn't there because of whatever. I was there because I cared. I was there because it was part of my responsibility, his suffering, because we were doing it together. And I want to get into this last thing because that sounds grim. That sounds like, why would anybody want to do that? Why would anybody, do these things? And what I do with men in divorce and custody battles is I'll do that, right? I'll say, what is your pain? And if you've worked with me, I can be pretty hard and be like, dude, no, man, you need to shut the fuck up and do it like that. That will definitely come out, right? And in carrying men's pain, like literally walking them from beginning to end, to finish the job. In that whole thing, going to jails, prisons, reading a suicide note that got to me too late, you see something very, very different. Why they have pain, where that comes from, what they want as a solution. All the men that have this pain that we could pinpoint out in some intellectual way that comes from feminism, that comes from culture, that comes from, too much competition or whatever, all these different theories, none of them give a fuck about it. They all just want to stop it. And they want a solution that works. And at first, like let's just say with custody, I want a solution to get my kids back. Cool. I have one that we can try. I can't guarantee it, but we can try it. And it's going to be hard. It's going to challenge you. It's not going to go the way you think. It's going to go against a lot of those things. And I can give you guy after guy at this point who could have a similar story to yours, and he did a certain path, and you still won't want to do it. And then I can get you another guy and another guy and another guy. And some of those that are worse than yours, and you still won't want to do it. That's what a lot of the untying of this knot is. It's not to go, the courts are fucked and I'm going to change something. Dude, awesome. But win your goddamn case. Win what you can win. Get time with your kids. Do all that fucked up shit. Do it. If you're a drug addict and you read the Gabor Mate book or watched him talk and you said, man, addiction's the opposite of connection, and you think the solution is to go around getting hugs from people and to connect, no, that's what caused your problem, dude. But what is made is the addict. What is made is the trauma. What is made is the pain. What is made is the habit. What is made is living on the animal level. If you went through abuse and it wasn't able to be resolved, because that's very hard to do, you kind of block it out. You don't see it. You get away from it. You build survival skills, but then it starts to affect you 10, 20 years later. If you go, man, I just need to make peace with my inner child and then I'm good. No, because you built all these habits on it. You built a way of having relationships on it. You built a form of sexuality on it. Last night we were talking about NPD. And like when we have people in pain define the solution, we become idiots. What were some of the things that were being said about narcissistic abuse? When are you going to help me recover in the way that I want you to see me recover? You're now the symbol of the man that hurt me, and I want you to do whatever. Which is actually the irony of it. This is how things like NPD and borderline start. They come from abuse that's unresolved, that found all sorts of solutions throughout a lifetime of things, that was congratulated and ingratiated by the culture, that was rewarded. And man, how else were they going to deal with that abuse? And then it switches. Somebody has a kid, they lose their job, they get stressed out, they start to objectify the other person, a resentment builds that they can't process out, and then it starts seeing them as, I can get something for nothing from them. I'm going to use them. It's my survival skill to save myself that I had to do with my mom or my dad or an uncle or somebody who was abusing me or whatever it was that gets unresolved. And that creates all sorts of problems, depression, violence, but it also helps create narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. It triggers off into a whole bunch of other things, addiction. And so we have to realize that, yeah, that pain may have had a source and we want more of that, but it also unfolded a life. Another interesting thing, one of my friends, I was testing this and I doubt I will do it because too many people die from it, but we hear all sorts about plant medicine. And I worked at one of the first plant medicine aftercare facilities in the world. And every single person relapsed, but not by the definition of the people running the stats, meaning you could still use drugs, but you couldn't be an addict. And it was up to them to define what an addict was. And it changed almost every day to keep their stats so they could sell more people, because the plant medicine community it can be great. Like I believe in plant medicine. Let me just tell you, right? I believe in it. Again, it's this either or thing, right? But that is one of the most evil industries, or it was. I haven't touched it in about 5 years, but it was so screwed up because it marketed to wealthy people whose sons had already gone, or sons or daughters had already gone to rehab facilities and gotten kicked out and hated a traditional approach. That's what they call it. Traditional recovery has a 7%, and we have 70%. Bullshit. They have 0%. Now, what does recover with that, and this is interesting, like let's look at it, how I've seen ibogaine or iboga or ayahuasca or yahe, all things that I really, really love. I think they're good things, right? They're sacred, they're awesome. But if you use it wrong, it really screws you up. And if you give it to a drug addict who doesn't know how to live, who basically was homeless or a thief for even a 6-month period, what they're going to try and walk back from in that is, yes, maybe not always their urges are curbed. It does help with that. It does give a reset. But if you teach them sound bowl healing and walking in nature and how to do body weight exercises, there's a whole bunch of bad habits that still can come up. And it does. And it worked with all of them. And the people that I saw achieve better recovery from that were people that weren't addicts, that were on the low end of things. Like they still worked, had jobs, were a part of society, they had a family that could support them, they had people that they could count on. They didn't have to get into recovery and then remake a new family and these types of things. Those were the people that I saw recover. But if you went through some hardcore stuff, you need more. You need a lot more. And so there, false solution, man. I'm going to sell something. I'm going to bring something there. So this is an interesting thing, and I'm going to wrap this up. I've talked way too much. But one of the key things about, I think, in working with men is men have pain. Our pain comes from our nature being repressed. That doesn't just mean that, we go live what we imagine like a caveman is. It means that parts of our nature are sacred that we need to get to, men and women. We live in a massive societal distortion. We're afraid to do real work, to touch deep shames within us. We have a culture that rewards bypassing and sociopathic behaviors. In almost every form of life, to get ahead, we can gladly screw somebody over. And it's accepted. And so we need to start understanding what real connection is, real empathy is, what a real body is, what real sex is, what real vision is, what real purpose is. And when we get into these things, we start to realize man makes also some really good things. So our nature is what we're born with, that we don't have any control over. We were given it, whether that was given by a supernatural figure or just biology happened to spit us out. It's awesome. We're carbon, dust that came together, that gets to think and have conversations and imaginations and create things and have a full range of emotions. That's pretty amazing. That's our nature. But what man makes is really awesome. So man can make trash, freeways, a lot of pain for each other, isolation. But man also makes philosophy, virtue, higher thought, wisdom, society. Our society, for almost 10,000 years now, has had a chain of history, has been able to create new forms of agriculture and life. And you could assign all these, negative qualities to that, of overpopulation and totalitarianism and all this stuff. But that's amazing. And so when we get to this, what are some of the greatest things that always get carried over? What is legacy? We always hear about legacy, but we want legacy as power because we're purpose deficient. So we want to be important. But what real legacy is, what I would like it to be, and what real legacy comes from real life of men working, not just achieving some superficial thing of a bunch of people liking it, but working, is that I can create something that lasts. It doesn't need to be my name. It needs to serve people like me, things, thoughts, all these different things that it can do that. What is wisdom? Wisdom isn't just being wise and people liking you and thinking you're really smart. Wisdom needs to be challenged. Wisdom isn't just intelligence. It's not just knowledge. It's application. It needs experience. It needs to be worked. It needs to last, but it also needs to have intention. Because we can be smart, we can figure things out, we can make things last. But that could be like not apologizing for movements that create pain. It needs to have good intention. And when it has good intention, it gets worked, it gets challenged, it has a standard. It has a standard that's the spirit of man, because things made by humanity only serve humanity. That's how special they are and how important they are. Our toxic beliefs, our toxic waste, are good things. Our ability to make cars and drive them, whether you think that's good or bad, that only serves humanity. Our pollution might hurt some other things, but actually, when you really think about this, hurting Mother Earth may not be good, but Mother Earth could wipe us out like that. The ecosystem of the world, we could damage it, but it'll kill us first and go on and reset in whatever ways it needs to. I'm not saying that so you should just go fuck shit up, but realize who you are in this. Our thoughts, who we are, what we make, serves something really awesome. The most special thing about that is that we can bring goodness to it. Not just goodness and going like, man, that's good, oh my goodness, but the goodness that Plotinus talked about, that Plato talked about, the virtues of what real philosophy is. Many men get into Stoicism, they get into all this stuff. Love that, learn it, go deep with it. Stop having it serve as a quick fix for your inconvenience in modern culture and start realizing who you are and what you are. Because who you are and what you are, we can always hear this and it'll be, it may not be a great quote, but let's actually hope it's not. Let's hope it's not a quote. Who you are only serves you and then maybe the people around you. It was never meant to have everything else. If I have words that were popular, it should carry something that exists in the spirit in every man that can evolve to something great and good. In any case, I always want to encourage you guys, go out and work with people, be of service. Go and talk to people. You don't need to do it all the time. If there's homeless people, I've done a lot of time with homeless people. I don't roll my window down and give them $1 and have a conversation or whatever it is all the time, or a sandwich or anything like that. You got to have boundaries in this world. But go out and integrate with the world at least once a day. At least once a day, talk to somebody. Realize you're human. Share something, because empathy is of our nature. Judgment is a byproduct of too much of things. Borders are not natural. They're needed. They're good. I like them. I have boundaries. But in the millions of years of humanoid form, of living in small tribes, of where our brains formed and different feedback happened that moved up in some evolutionary form, we didn't have boundaries. We had to stay together. We had empathy. We had connection. We had need to talk to people. And we live in a world where we are forced, and for our own good, kind of, we ignore 1,000 people a day because we have to. It just wasn't how our brains are made. So go out, talk to people, integrate a little, keep your boundaries up because you kind of got to. It's just not safe. And talk to the world. Be defined by being a human. And I'll tell you this, man, in working so deeply with some deep and highly problematic people and doing a lot of good to help them in some different ways, the best answer I have has more to do with that and saying hello to somebody and caring and sharing with them than any of that shit. I like money. I like sex. I like power. I like dominance. I like winning. But man, you turn all that stuff into some really stupid stuff if you don't have empathy. Let's open it up for some questions. Much more topic that people generally hate. I know this because in talking about this since 2012 on YouTube, these types of talks are disliked and very few questions. Let me get my reading glasses, my spectacles for you guys. Okay. Fragility. It comes down to control, dominating, and self mutilation of emotions, emotion availability. Dude, man, I'll tell you this. Like, when it comes down to certain battles, right? Custody battles, when it comes down to you having to fight for something, we need to start understanding what war is. Like, what do you fight war for? You fight war to protect yourself first, to preserve. But when it becomes an overall thing, right? When it becomes for a group, we're fighting for a way, a survival. Sometimes in battle, it could just get as cheap as like, man, you stepped on my toes, I'm going to step on your toes. What's so amazing, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, like the guys in my groups know, what's so special about fighting a custody battle is you fight. You fight with the deepest shit in you. And if you're going to fight in a lot of the ways that we fight, which is going to be like, all right, let's play by the courts. Let's be really strategic. Let's really be really technical, probably in ways that you're not expecting and you may not want to do. And we win that. There is so much pressure in that. There's so much hatred in that. There's so much contempt in that. And the natural path, the natural endpoint to contempt, hatred, all these different negative things, these toxins that we feel are going to be caring, compassion, and so on. And they take a lot to get there. But if you enter into that sort of deception and that sort of fight and think that you can just jump to the next, you're not going to be able to fight. A lot of times in family court, like people hate this, but what I see in high conflict, I don't see exceptions to this. I don't see exceptions to high conflict custody if you're a man with all the false allegations, all the parental alienation. You can't bypass hate. You have to have it. And if you're going to have it, let's go through it. Let's not let it kill you. Let's not let it hurt anybody, but let's use it to move forward. And what that means is you're going to be thinking a lot of that sort of stuff. Like, it's crazy, man. When it comes to divorce and custody, you go through so much evil, wicked shit. It's insane, man. But it's righteous because it gets you, as one of my mentors says, oh man, you got to go to the dark because that's where the good light is. It can be a beautiful thing. It does not feel good. It's not beautiful if you're going through it, but that's part of it. That's actually what I'm so proud of with my groups. I know it was a big thing for me that if I was going to go through that kind of hatred, I wanted to go deep without it killing me because I knew it would come into something good. That to me is one of the benefits of having early pain and trauma in life. You know, like 14, I was a drug addict. Tried to get sober, got sober finally when I was 17, relapsed at 20, then found the real pain. And then at 30, got clean again. But that sort of early suffering and faith that there could be something good, man, when I started to go through like more adult pain, it was like, okay, this is good. I hate it. I want to die. I'd actually rather die. But if I am going to live, I know it'll turn into something good. When men begin to be human again, they have to give up the God complex. This is actually an interesting thing, you know. So I wonder about this. Like, so we as guys going through custody battles, parental alienation, you get the shitty text message, you can't pick up the kids, something gets changed, you get undermined in all these ways. And guys do this too, whatever, all that sort of stuff. In that whole thing, can you imagine this? And this is, I think, part of the wisdom that we need in repairing our culture. When guys get that power again, and as it says here, like when men begin to be human again, they have to give up the God complex. When we get power, and we're in pain and we've been starved, or we've been, decimated, when we've been disenfranchised, we bring a lot of hell to power. And what's so sad about what both men and women have to look at with our role models and influences and this sort of thing, we just have narcissistic, sociopathic people as our what we're fans of, right? It's so screwed up. Like, it's so fucked up. And so we think, it's like, so a woman goes through a divorce, she gets a haircut, she goes badass on social media. She says, like, I'm on top of the world. Like, I'm, Miss Badass, Boss Babe, all that sort of stuff. When she has her power going through that pain. And we as guys look at that and we go, man, that's stupid. What a dumb thing. But guys do the same thing. We go, man, I'm going to get on testosterone. I'm going to join the gym. I'm going to kick ass. I'm going to get a motorcycle, all these things. And like, as a guy, I can relate with all of that, right? I can go like, man, that would be like a pretty good high five. That would be like a thing that it would be like, holy shit, that's some good stuff. So we have to learn how to go towards power. And there's a disrespect of the elders in our culture. We have no elders in our culture. Like, we don't respect it. There would be no worth to do that. We're chasing youth in so many ways, so that wisdom, things like integrity, really what it is. Because you can say, I have integrity because I made a couple decisions, they lasted a year. That's the definition of modern culture. But nobody fucking lives with shit. Nobody, we don't have that. And if we have that, we call them old, slow, and stupid. Like, our culture no longer looks at that. We're too flashy and we love all these things, right? And so we have these terrible role models that teach us to bypass those things and almost have no worth with it. Like, I wonder what will happen. Man, my man is on YouTube. What's up, A-Dog? How you doing? I'm happy to hear about everything going on with your case. That's super cool. I'm so happy that you for the moment, hopefully forever, you don't need things in my group. That is awesome, because you're doing the hard road, pro se road, working to get custody in the right ways in an uphill battle. Let me read this comment. I just saw your name. But son's mom will always get a pass. Okay, my son's mom will always get a pass, but there is a few people in my case that are gonna have to pay for what they have done, not to me, what they did to my kid. What an excellent topic. So I'll talk about this, and this is really important. We hear a lot of people talk about forgiveness, and most of those people talking about forgiveness, talking about what it means to be a better man or a better person, better woman, whatever it is, haven't ever really forgiven deep things. And I know this because there's a couple odd stories that are in my life. Okay. So one of them is that when I first got sober, my first girlfriend was kidnapped and she was tortured and all these horrible things. This really sucks. And when I talk about it, what's the first thing that people say? Say, why are you talking about it? Why, it happened to her. Man, it's my story. I don't know how to say it, but it was really fucked up. And it changed my life. It changed her life too, right? And the guys who did it, the guys who kidnapped her and tortured her, I walked across the street. And here's what's even worse. I walked across the street, I meet my friend, my lifelong childhood friend. I'm still friends with her. And as the alarms are going off at where she's at, and they're actually robbing and assaulting her at that time that we know from the timeline. A cop comes up to me because I'm smoking a cigarette and he pats me down, all that sort of stuff. There, I could measure it. I know where I was. I was at a Del Taco and there was a gas station. And it was like, let's say 150 yards away. And as the cops are shaking me down, they're torturing her. And they began a 5-hour process where they did that. And it was a gang initiation. You can imagine. She ends up 25 miles away, thrown out of a moving car, naked. And, there were some clothes that were thrown out of the window that she could retrieve, and a car picked her up. And so I saw the people who did it. I saw the people who kidnapped her. She saw everybody who was involved in it. And the police screwed up the process. This was in the 90s. They had DNA, but it wasn't that good then. And so they messed it up. And during that, also, they interrogated the living shit out of me. I don't even really remember it all, right? They had said, you did this. They had her go through the whole thing to see how I reacted, I guess. And when you're a kid, I was 18 and I didn't really understand any of this. Later on, when I found out how detectives worked, it's a part of their process. And it totally fucked up everything about my reality from that moment on. And it's like, I didn't know it fucked me up. I just, whatever. And so those guys never got caught. Those guys, and we knew what gang they were a part of. Now, at the time, I was in recovery, and recovery is one of the best places to find the most resourceful people, and it's also one of the best places to find some of the most fucked up people. So some of the most fucked up people all knew about this, and thank God for recovery. It saved my life. It saved so much of my life. And they were like, let's go kill these guys. Cool. Her dad is like, let's kill these people. Bunch of people. A very, very sweet, sweet girl. Let's fucking kill them. They deserve to die. And, you think that, right? Maybe that's an unhealthy thought. But most people wouldn't say that in that situation, especially if she were saying that. They'd stop you from that. And I forget how long it was. Maybe it was 6 months or whatever, but we had the plan, man. And it was like, it was right. Wait a little bit longer. Let's go find one of the guys that we knew was involved. Let's torture him and fuck him up. So what happens is another person has a similar situation, right? His girlfriend gets assaulted by somebody that they knew. And the police in that city didn't care. They didn't pursue it. And thinking back about this, I'm wondering what the situation may have really been, but who knows? But here's how that story ended, which is really fucked up. These guys go in to beat the shit out of the dude and kill him. And if you're being attacked with the intent of being killed, you can defend yourself. And he does. And he kills one of them and injures a few others. And when that happened, we all kind of thought, maybe we should wait. And therapy, time, who knows how much it helped. I'm glad I went. But you just can't peel the craziness of how much that affects you away, right? And actually, I wrote about this in today's thing, about my PTSD. My PTSD really started around that. And so then, that was in 1994 or something like that. And so in 2019, when I had some other stuff that came up, that PTSD got triggered. And I was like, oh my God, I've done all this work. I can't believe it. Why is this happening? And I've never been a person that says, I beat PTSD. I really think that's an unhealthy mentality. And I think you can manage it and whatever. But it was so humbling for it to come back in some ways. But what was interesting in that is that when it came back in 2019, I thought about that whole situation a lot. And those people eventually were caught, DNA got better. 16 years had passed. And when that happened, the 16-year thing, the detectives had me identify him, and I did. I was like, this is bullet. Come on, dude, really? And when I saw that fucking lineup, man, it was like, it was the craziest, like, fucking thing, dude. 100% I believed that I knew who those motherfuckers were, but I didn't think they were motherfuckers anymore. And forgiveness had happened. That I saw them as people, and I saw it. It wasn't a logical thing. It was that a feeling had passed and I could put thoughts to it. And so then when I went through more pain in my life, I knew that forgiveness could happen if I followed certain paths, but it couldn't be forced. In 2020, I heard this monk talk, and I now actually follow part of a similar thing, not the same thing as him. I heard him talk, and he said, forgiveness is not what you think it is. It's letting go of the things inside you that can hold on to hatred. And if we deny hatred, we can never know where those things are. We have to hold on to the painful thing. We have to hold on. We have to touch it. We have to know it. Maybe to pass through it, maybe for this cathartic thing, but we have to know it. We have to hold on to it. And so in these custody battles, which I've had too, it's okay to hate. You don't need to have it dominate you. You don't need to do something mean. You don't have to do something evil. You don't need retaliation. But you can never get to that good stuff. You can never get to the sweetness of it. You can never have it change into compassion and love, understanding and empathy. You can never have it become the best things of that human experience if you don't hold it. And the risk of touching it, holding it, you don't have to always have it out, right? It's kind of like you got to have a little boundary with it. You can put it away in a box and that sort of thing. You do have to compartmentalize it, but you have to touch it every once in a while, maybe once a day, maybe once a week, maybe in a group, and you know it's there and you respect it because it knows a path. Everybody writes about it. All the old wise people that wrote all the cool stuff that we'd like to quote but not follow, everybody talks about it. Human beings need anger. Human beings need the human experience to get to the good stuff. And man, I think that's so important for guys going through these hardcore custody battles, women too. Like I said, I work with guys. Man, you can hate. One of my favorite things that was said to by my therapist, and I asked him about it. I interviewed him actually. I got to publish the interview. And I said, man, how come you didn't 5150 me? He's like, look, dude, you were going to therapy. You were going to a ton of meetings. You were always being of service. You were doing everything that you wanted to do. And even though you were talking about it, about wanting to kill yourself, you're talking about wanting to hurt people, you're talking about your plans of killing people, like all that PTSD stuff came right back. It's like you're doing all the right things that I didn't think I needed to, but it's always a risk. But I was pretty sure of it. I've been practicing for 45 years. I was pretty sure of it. And he said, but there's something that people don't talk about. He said, if you don't clean the gun, practice the shot, find the target. This is all some really crazy shit. Like, I don't want to promote this message literally, right? If you don't go over that all in your head, write the name on the bullet, all that sort of stuff, and you don't get to the point right where you know you can pull that trigger, if you don't get that, you're never truly making the decision to stop. You've never owned that. You've always been afraid of it. You kept it in the box too much. You never handled the hate. And that's really tough, right? Like when we hear this, like even I'm being cautious, but everybody's like, you tell men this? You realize how dangerous that is? Dude, yeah. Our anger, our pain, our contempt, our rage, our wanting to kill is still attached to good things, and men need to be able to go through it. If you take that away from them and don't give them an opportunity to ever get to know it, something in life will happen and then you go and your girlfriend gets kidnapped, you go to kill somebody and you get killed, or you go and you teach the person the wrong thing, or you don't allow the experience to happen. And sometimes I get it, man, you can't help it. You're so pissed off, you want to rage. We're only human, but we need to remain human and not this weird cookie cutter archetype of what a man and a woman is supposed to be, defined by hurt men and women. A very, very hard thing. Let's see. Anyway, man, I'm so happy you were in my group. And I'm happy things are working out. And thanks for the comment. Anyway, not too much else was written in, more of the philosophical type thing. Very, very good stuff. Oh, Jose. Man, Jose is such a good dude. I love that guy, man. When you identify as a human being, you don't need approval from other men. Yeah, but sometimes we need, look, this is what I dislike about the red pill, man, is it's like, I don't need a woman. I totally need a woman. I may not need a woman like in an enslavement way or whatever, but like we need people. Part of masculinity and femininity is they're incomplete without each other, right? And when we become men or women that don't need each other, we're going against nature. Like, I don't mean that in a political way of that sort of thing. We're going against forces of nature inside of ourselves to unify. That doesn't mean you have to love everybody. It doesn't mean you have to love every man or woman. You can decide. But again, all those little things of nature, you got to hold on a little bit. Yeah. Good stuff on the YouTube. Forgive those that persecute you for self-healing, but doesn't mean you have to deal with it. It's exactly right, man. Dude, I'll say this. My groups are awesome. One of the best things, like if you're starting a men's group, okay, so guys, if you're starting a men's group, every guy says he wants to start a men's group, especially goes through some hard shit. And then they never do, because it is difficult, right? It's easy for me somehow or whatever, but like it's clearly hard. Like lots of people failed them. You don't need pillow fights and fake wrestling or go into an inipi, which is a sweat lodge once, and then sing a Lakota song that you know nothing about. By the way, I practice the whole inipi thing and song thing and take it pretty seriously. And I've always wrestled and all that shit. So you don't need to do that. What you need a really good men's therapist. If you're helping out men in custody battles, you need some legal assistance or lawyers. You need events that unify. You don't need a crazy ideology. So here's my group. Like, there's no religion or politics allowed. You can talk about your stuff, but we don't need it. How do we become a better guy today? How do I help? How do I talk to you? How do I base that off of the experience of the male experience in the modern world and not like a Christian value, a Muslim value, a Buddhist philosophy or whatever? Don't care. I personally could care about that a lot. You could care about it a lot. But that's how you have the longest running online men's group in the world, is that. That's how you have it. Like, that's how you have a men's group that meets 7 days a week, where guys are going, man, I want to be a part of this. And I don't want to say like every guy loves it, but that's what you do. Like, if you have a men's group, give it what it needs. Give it outlets to talk about anything. And that's what I say. You can talk about anything. I just don't want you to promote religion or politics in it. But if it affects you, you can talk about it, right? You can talk about hatred, you can talk about killing, you can talk about whatever. I'm not going to encourage you to do it, but I want you to share whatever's there because all of it can have a route to good. And sometimes we have to be really, really careful, you know? And I do think professionals and therapists and all these things should come in it. Man, God, I hate the Disneyland like breath work, whatever. Like I love doing those things. They're good, but when you see these men and women say like I let go of all of my childhood trauma and that, or like plant medicine, another one. Okay, so I have I've done a lot of ceremonies, a lot. Um, there's my friends have done way more. Like many of my friends that I interact with in other countries have drank yahe or ayahuasca over 1,000 times, maybe more than 2,000 times. Like it's part of their life and culture. Um, and they're kind of normal, right? They're not like hippy dippy people. They're they're their own people, but they like you wouldn't know it. They would never be the stereotype. When I see people get out of doing like a ayahuasca or ceremony or yahe ceremony or whatever, and they're in the U.S. or somewhere like that, very often, not always. Like there's very good people that do it, and there's so much good things about it. But like I did 10 years of therapy in one night or over a weekend. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You just feel really good right now and you saw some crazy shit and you probably don't understand it. You don't understand the feelings that you're having now. You need to, lack of a better term, integrate. Like we're so obsessed with broadcasting how healed and fixed we are so that we could have the result of power and glory and fame and finally get the validation that probably hurt us in the first place. When you see people like in the jungle or tribal cultures do that sort of stuff, there's like none of that. They're happy. They're, all of that, but it's not for the purpose. Like they don't have the same problem, right? Like they don't have the problem of not being loved for long periods of their life. They don't have the problem of being abandoned or growing up with one or two parents. They always have people around and they have huge problems other than that. But it's kind of crazy to see how isolated we are. I am going to end this because I got to sleep. And you guys are great, great people. What is self-love without pain? What up, Jose? Thank you. Man. And what's the only thing that can get you through the pain, man? Is finding the new love. Finding the new love, man. Good stuff. All right. Later, guys. Hope you enjoyed this one. I'll probably be off for about a week, but I did 5 live broadcasts this week, and I kind of like it. It's a cool thing. Thanks for coming.